So wonderful to be here with you today. I'm here from DC, Washington, DC. I flew down yesterday. I can't tell you, it is great to be outside of DC, to be here with you all who are working on the front lines day in and day out. I mean, my title slide, I think, does say it all, down but not out. And I think seeing you all, seeing the energy, the passion, the dedication, the commitment that you bring to your work day in and day out really does reinforce for me that we definitely are not out of this fight. So thanks for all that you do, and thanks for the invitation. So today we've been talking all day about the journey, right? Where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. We've had a lot of accomplishments in tobacco control. I think Sharon walked us through that really nicely this morning. You're going to hear some redundancy in my talk today. There's a lot of consistent themes that I think we've heard throughout the day. I just like to think of it as I'll be maybe highlighting. Think of what I'm talking about as highlights of messages that you've heard throughout the day. But I'm going to be sharing a national perspective. I'm really going to be focusing on where we are and where I think we can go and where we can go together. And like we heard earlier today, we've made a lot of accomplishments, right? We've had a lot of progress on our journey. And that progress is in tobacco use rates. National adult smoking rates are way down. I mean, single digits now for the first time ever, under 10% for adult smoking. This phenomenal progress. We should really celebrate it. But disparities persist, and we know that smoking rates are still too high in certain demographic groups, people of low income, low education, American Indians, folks living in rural areas, folks suffering with mental health conditions. Their rates are still way higher than the 10%, certainly not in double digits. So there's still work to do. That's why we're all in this fight. And you've made great progress in South Carolina. Again, to be celebrated. I know the quit line had a lot to do with that. It was nice to hear about that this morning. But the rates are still higher for these products, for cigarettes, for e-cigarettes, and smokeless use. The rates are higher than they are nationally. So again, work to do. And there's a lot going on in this slide. This is what high school smoking rates, the trends in high school smoking rates across the country, what they look like. For the past 10 years, we've seen the most popular product among young people are e-cigarettes. That continues today. While e-cigarette use rates have declined dramatically since they reached their peak in 2019, they're still too high. At 7.1% of high school students are using e-cigarettes. That's over 1.4 million youth. The second most popular product among young people are nicotine pouches, and we've seen the use of these products rise dramatically just in the past couple of years. And what you can't really see here is cigarette smoking rates, down below 2%. 1.8% of high school students smoke cigarettes. We want to still keep driving that down so no one is smoking cigarettes, but again, phenomenal progress. But we're keeping our eye on young adults. Right? We haven't seen the progress among young adults that we've seen among youth. You can see here the far slide, that's nicotine pouch use. It's been about a threefold increase in use of nicotine pouches among young adults in just the past couple of years. It's about 8% now. And then over here you see the e-cigarette use rate among young adults is about 15%. And fortunately, we've seen the decline in cigarette smoking among young adults. But we care about young adults. Their brain continues to develop until the mid-20s. So their exposure to nicotine, the use of these products is of concern. And so that's another population that we're still tracking and trying to think about programs and policies, interventions that we can put into place to help this population. Now here's what the youth rates look like in South Carolina. We're seeing some good positive trends here. Youth rates are down across the products, particularly, e-cigarettes came down from the high, but still about 10% of high school students in South Carolina are using e-cigarettes. So we want to continue to implement programs and policies to help address that. So now I'm going to spend some time talking about the product landscape. We've heard this morning, I think you all know, it's evolved dramatically over the past several years. It looks totally different. Ashley said, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, which is hard to believe. It's true, but we didn't even talk about what were e-cigarettes. They weren't even around. Pouches certainly weren't around. And so now our focus has changed. And we're changing, we're evolving with it. There's now e-cigarettes, different categories of e-cigarettes, hundreds of flavors of e-cigarettes. There's nicotine pouches, there's heated tobacco products, all in addition to the traditional cigars, smokeless, and cigarettes. So we've had to learn a lot in recent years, right? What are the products? How do they work? What are their health effects? Who's using them? Why are they using them? And what's the best way to regulate them? So we're on a rapid learning curve. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, right? Like, there's more to do, but we are trying to keep up with it. We try to stay ahead of the tobacco industry, but that is, something that it's hard work. So I'm going to focus the next few minutes on two categories of products, e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches, and that's because those are the products that we see youth using the most and young adults using the most. So first, nicotine pouches. Well, nicotine pouches are these little pouches that you see here. They're packets of nicotine powder, flavorings, and other chemical substances that people put in between, in the mouth, between the lip and the gum. And retail sales, we've seen youth use go up, but retail sales have actually tripled, more than tripled, between 2023 and 2025. All of the major tobacco companies have a nicotine pouch brand, but there are lots of smaller companies that also have nicotine pouch brands. Only 2 brands of products are actually authorized by the FDA. So that means just only 2 brands, Zyn and On Plus, have received marketing orders and are legal to be sold by the FDA. So why do we care about nicotine pouches, right? What is their impact on young people? Well, the last thing we need is another nicotine product that's addictive and widely promoted to young people, right? We just don't need that. There's no reason to be using nicotine products recreationally. And while the rates of nicotine pouch use, they've gone up, but they're still pretty low at around 2%. But I think we've all heard, at least, folks I talk to have heard, we talk to principals and teachers, we see in school parking lots the packets of Zyn. So there's these anecdotal reports that, use of nicotine pouches is really widespread. I can tell you a story. I have a high school sophomore son who plays baseball, and he played on the JV team last year, and he came home and he said, I'm really excited for Jackson. Jackson got called up to varsity. I was like, that's really good. You should send him a note and congratulate him. He said, yeah, I'm doing it right now. And I said, well, what did he say? Is he excited? And he said, well, he said, this means he'll be on Zyn duty. I was like, what does that mean? It means he needs to make sure that all the varsity players have Zyn for the games. So, we're not seeing it in the 2%. That's the rate right now, 2.5%, but we have these anecdotal stories of the use is really widespread, so we're concerned about it. And flavors are driving youth use. Almost all the kids who use nicotine pouches are using flavored products, and by far and away, Zyn is the most popular product. 3/4 of high school nicotine pouch users report using Zyn. So it's no surprise kids are using these products because they're getting targeted, right, through social media marketing, music sponsorships. Zyn sponsors events, and it has their logo, their brand all over the place. They sponsor, this is a Noah-Con. If you enrolled in the Zyn Rewards program, you were eligible to get tickets to a small concert in Denver with Noah-Con. Zyn now sponsors cars in Formula One, F1 car racing, which has become more popular among US youth. And Joe Rogan and other personalities talk about Zyn and promote the product on their podcast. So that's where we are with nicotine pouches. E-cigarettes are another category of nicotine products that has really evolved in recent years. It started out with e-cigarettes were these cigarette-like products, then they were big tanks, then there were the pods, like the Juul pods, and more recently, we've gotten into disposable e-cigarette products. And they remain a serious public health concern. As I mentioned earlier, there's over 1.4 million kids are using e-cigarettes. And e-cigarette use, again, continues to be driven by flavors. 9 out of 10 high school students who use e-cigarettes report using flavored products. Nearly all kids who use e-cigarettes say that they started using with a flavored product. And this is concerning because of the nicotine in the products, the signs of addiction that youth are showing who are using these products. You know, kids are not just experimenting with e-cigarettes, they're using them and they're becoming addicted. 43% of high school e-cigarette users say they use the product on at least 20 days a month, and 30% say they use the products every single day. And we know there's also a sizable proportion of young people who say they are using these products within the first 30 minutes of waking up. So these are serious signs of addiction, and why we continue to be concerned and look for ways to address the use of these products. So like I said, we're concerned about the nicotine in these products because the way the nicotine has been in these products, the way it has also evolved. How it's been delivered to the young people has also evolved. So you might remember back when Juul came on the scene, the new thing that Juul did was use nicotine salts, which nicotine salts were a way to deliver more nicotine more efficiently to the user, without the harshness. So that was the big thing about Juul. That was their innovation that really took off, and then we had all these copycats who tried to do that and use the nicotine salts. Well, now, it's not the nicotine salts per se, but it's just the sheer amount of nicotine that is in these products. You know, we used to be alarmed when Juul had, oh my gosh, Juul advertised that one pod equaled a pack of cigarettes. Well, now, some of the disposable e-cigarettes on the market contain as much nicotine as 20 packs of cigarettes. So that is really concerning. You know, disposable e-cigarettes are becoming more and more popular among young people, and those are the products that are containing these high levels of nicotine. And we know that nicotine has serious risks to young people. Not only is it addictive, but it can harm the developing brain. It affects attention. It affects memory. It affects the ability to learn. It affects the ability to control impulses. And it also can prime the brain for addiction to other drugs, to other more serious drugs. And so you've probably heard about smart vapes. Well, that's a kind of disposable e-cigarette, that's come on the scene. And smart vapes, I mean, the tobacco companies, they think of everything, right? So smart vapes actually have what we call smart features, like a smartphone. They have Bluetooth connectivity, which allows users to connect to social media platforms, to receive text notifications, to get notifications from their phone. They have speakers. Some of them have speakers. Some of them have games. You can play Pac-Man on some of these smart vapes. And so, as the Surgeon General rightly pointed out, this is really alarming and troubling because it combines two addictive behaviors that we're really concerned about for kids: gaming and nicotine. Smart vape marketing targets young people, just like we saw with nicotine pouches. E-cigarette companies are promoting these products on social media, through sponsoring concerts. Geek Bar, which is a popular smart vape, actually has a series of concerts that they call Geek Fest, and they promote those all over social media. They have influencers and celebrity spokespeople who are also promoting use of the product. And here are the most popular e-cigarettes among young people, and no surprise that Geek Bar and Raz are in the top 6. Those are two smart vapes. Elf Bar is another disposable product. So, you know, something that we're very concerned about with youth, easy access to these products, and wide promotion of these products. So moving on to the industry, you know, we cannot talk about our journey in tobacco control without talking about the industry, right? Our big foe who are fighting us at every turn, it seems. But the good news is, I guess if you want to put a good spin on it, we know what we're up against. Sure, we have a serious foe, right? We have this enemy who just seems to have endless amounts of money, right? But we know what we're up against because they've been using the same playbook for decades, right? They're targeting young people. I just talked about how they're targeting youth. They're promoting their products in ways that appeal to youth and reach youth. They're making political donations and lobbying. I think we heard from Beth today just how much influence they have here in South Carolina in the state capitol. Well, you're not alone. Industry lobbyists are roaming state capitals. But they're also making political donations. We know that Reynolds was the largest single contributor to Trump's 2024 presidential campaign. Altria is a sponsor of the White House ballroom. Glass is an e-cigarette company, a US-based e-cigarette company out of California. It was reported last week that a major investor in Glass has been a major contributor to Trump's inauguration committee and has been a big contributor to Trump's campaign since 2016. Now, why this is important is because Glass is the first company to receive authorization for fruit-flavored vapes, and that just happened last week after it was reported there was meetings with the White House. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But front groups, the industry uses front groups to promote its message, right? The public health community, we've done a really good job of highlighting the bad acts of the industry, shedding light on what they're up to and their misinformation they're sharing. So they've gone out and they've got front groups who are sharing misinformation for them. We have front groups testifying in state houses. We have front groups writing op-eds, putting out reports, making public comments when there's opportunity to do so, like for instance in front of the FDA. And these front groups are really, what we try to do as a national organization is try to point out when there's an industry connection. That's not always easy to do, but the front groups are, they're trying to make it seem like what the industry's perspective or their position is more mainstream, that it's acceptable, that it's broadly acceptable. And we know that's not the truth. And so our job is to point that out, share the facts, point out the information, and whenever we can, make that connection with the tobacco industry. Litigation, they're always challenging us, trying to roll back our policies in court. And so that takes up a lot of resources from the public health community of trying to beat back legal challenges that we have to deal with from the tobacco industry. And weak proposals, I think we heard that from Beth this morning too. We're hearing, the tobacco industry is always and has for decades been putting forth proposals that we know are not going to work, but seem like they're a good idea. Like a couple decades ago, it was with smoke-free policies, right? They would put forward an alternative smoke-free policy that just covered wasn't comprehensive. More recently, we've been seeing the directory and registry laws, which are trying to legitimize illegal products, right? Put these e-cigarette products on a list. Tell people they're legal, when in fact they're not legal. They can only be legal if they receive a marketing authorization from FDA. Being on a list from Virginia or South Carolina or Rhode Island does not make the product legal, but that's what the industry is selling, and that's the kind of misinformation they're sharing and the kind of bills they're trying to get passed. And lastly, image rebranding, right? They've been doing this for a long time, trying to make themselves seem like the good guys, right? We care about people. We don't want people to smoke. We want to move them to less harmful alternatives. We want a smoke-free future. We've heard that from Philip Morris for a while. Meanwhile, they say those things, but they are doing everything they can to sell cigarettes, and cigarettes really remain, despite all these other products, the basis of their business. Where they make the most money is in selling cigarettes. And so they're not really interested in supporting policies that is going to impact that cigarette business. We're hearing more and more about harm reduction. I think there's a real debate and conversation that can be had around harm reduction, but don't be fooled. The industry is not going to help us reduce tobacco use. Their version of harm reduction is not the one that we need to be listening to. It's not the one that is going to help us get to where we need to go, right? What they're interested in is addicting more people, selling more products, and why? All to raise profits, right? That's what they care about, their bottom line. And so, yeah, if Zyn is going to help them, boost their profits, yes, but don't do it too much. We don't want people to, stop smoking Marlboro, right? It's just kind of keeping people addicted, right? More products, to use products in different settings. What I didn't say about the e-cigarettes and the nicotine pouches, they're easy to conceal, right? So young people can use them where they don't want to get caught. People can use them in smoke-free settings, on airplanes, whatever. So again, this is just the industry trying to smoke and mirrors, right? Say one thing, do another. They are not about helping us solve our problems. They are not part of the solution. Another thing I'll touch on real quickly, I don't know if you've seen the another piece of misinformation they and their allies, have been out there saying now is the benefits of nicotine, right? They've been touting the benefits of nicotine. And for a long time, they've tried to say, oh, it's not nicotine. We shouldn't be worried about nicotine. Nicotine actually has benefits. That's what they say. Well, again, we cannot trust the tobacco industry, right? They're sharing misinformation. Nicotine is harmful. And so I think we just need to, it's incumbent upon us to educate policymakers, to educate our community members about, share the facts, share the truth, and don't trust the tobacco companies. So where we are in terms of the federal programs, the federal infrastructure, right? We are on this journey. It has been a tough year, right? Lots of roadblocks, lots of challenges that we've had to deal with. Federal infrastructure for tobacco control was decimated last year. I know you all know that. HHS announced a department-wide reorganization last April that eliminated CDC's Office on Smoking and Health. It also included significant cuts to the Center for Tobacco Products at FDA. This was unprecedented, devastating cuts. Colleagues, friends of ours lost their jobs. Programs we care about were cut, were eliminated. So we're still dealing with that environment, right? We're still recovering from that. CDC OSHA is a pillar of tobacco prevention and control in the US. It's the only agency within the federal government responsible for comprehensive tobacco prevention and cessation. They were a leader, right? They provided grants to states. They provided technical assistance and expertise, surveillance, research and analysis, not to mention the highly effective public education campaign, Tips from Former Smokers. So all of that was gone, right? Happy to hear, happy to see that the state grants went out. But that was after much delay, significant uncertainty. The uncertainty remains today, right? We don't know. I know there's someone asked this morning, well, who do I talk to about the timing of this? And when are we going to get funding for that? It's just a really tough environment. So I appreciate the work that everyone has done here in this room under these really tough, trying circumstances. And I will say in DC, we are working hard to lobby members of Congress. FY27 appropriations are just around the corner. In the next couple of weeks, we are continuing to meet with members of Congress and their staff to make the case for tobacco prevention and control, to let them know what the impact is on states, right? It's not just a national program, a public health program. These are funds that go to states, to people in your communities that you represent. These are real people, these are real stories, these are real programs, right? And so the states have been a tremendous partner with us in the past year. As we, as advocates, are in DC, are on Capitol Hill, we can make the case, but we can only do that if we have the information, if we have the stories. And states have been wonderful sharing with us information, stories, and we have used that pretty effectively. The good news is we do have champions on Capitol Hill. We do have people who are really upset about what's happened, who understand what OSH does, what OSH brings. And so we're going to be continuing to tell those stories. We're hopeful. The House, has zeroed out funding for tobacco control for several years. This predates Trump. The Senate has really been, they level funded CDC. in the last year. And we're continuing to push for level funding. And so we'll keep you all apprised of how that goes. We expect, it's almost June, they'll be having their committee meetings in June. And so we're just keeping on the fight, and I just, encourage you to stay in it with us and share that information when we ask for it, because it really, really does make a difference. So FDA is another, has been a pillar of tobacco control, a leader. I think of CDC as, they deal with the people. FDA is dealing with the products, with tobacco products, regulating the marketing and sale of tobacco products. And while they initially had significant cuts in staffing last year, all of those folks have been reinstated. So we're thinking of, you should think CTP is operating again at full capacity. And there's been a lot of turmoil in recent weeks. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but Commissioner Makari, the FDA commissioner, resigned last week. And he resigned because he was upset that FDA authorized flavored vapes. He understands, or he said that he understands the risk that these pose to young people, and he didn't think they should be authorized. It was also widely reported that he was going to be fired, so I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to wait for that to happen. But so that was just recent, like in the last 2 weeks. What he said he resigned over was the authorization, I had mentioned it earlier, of fruit-flavored vapes, blueberry and mango-flavored vapes. It's the first time FDA had authorized flavored products that were not menthol or tobacco flavored. So it was a big deal. And it's a big deal because fruit-flavored vapes, of the kids use a lot of flavors, but fruit-flavored vapes are the most popular among kids. And so it's not like we expect the market to move to these glass products because there's so many other illegal products still available, but it's really an unfortunate sign, potentially, or signal of what might be coming down the pike from FDA. In the same vein, FDA also announced a new policy where they were going to, if an e-cigarette or nicotine pouch company had put forward an application to have a product authorized, that FDA considers that those products are not illegal anymore, that they're not going to enforce the law against those. Those can stay on the market, which is a blatant, the Tobacco Control Act, which gave FDA authority over tobacco products, says that products to enter the market need to receive an order from FDA in order to be for sale on shelves. And FDA is just saying, no thanks, that's okay. We've got our own policy, and we're going to allow these products that have applications, we're going to allow them for sale. So really concerning things happening at FDA right now. It's really, honestly, the past month, more activity has happened in the past month than has happened in like years, right, of federal policy making. So there's a lot going on, a lot we're tracking. We're putting out press releases where members of Congress are paying close attention because they're really upset about what's happening at FDA now. One other thing I wanted to mention on a sort of a different track that is unprecedented that happened with FDA this year is typically the FDA and CDC work together to analyze and publish data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, the NYTS. That is our survey that we rely on for trends to monitor, track what's happening with youth tobacco use. This year, FDA, with CDC gone, it was totally under FDA's purview. And instead of publishing results, they just published the raw data. On their website, they announced it at a conference earlier this year, and they said, oh, anyone who's interested in the data, you can go download it here and do your own analysis. Well, the problem with that is you had Altria was right on it, did their analysis. We had a vape company do their analysis. Certainly public health groups at Rutgers and CDC Foundation did analyses. But now we have multiple groups doing analyses and making them public. It's a problem. So we're continuing to put pressure on FDA to try to get them to understand that there needs to be a federal agency that is responsible for collecting the data, analyzing the data, and getting it published. We need that, right? We need to know what's happening in terms of trends of these use of these products, and that's the NYTS is the main significant source for that information. So before I get to the state stuff, I want to just say, obviously, this work on the federal level tells us that we cannot rely, right, on federal partners to get the job done, right? The state and local work is more critical than ever, given the federal landscape. And I think that in our history, right, innovation and momentum comes from the state and local level. So we've been here before, right? We certainly can, we're up to the challenge, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. Focusing on state and local efforts, getting momentum, keeping things moving, so when there's a change, right, at the federal level, then we can shift back, hopefully have that leadership again. But for now, we need to keep on keeping on at the state and local level and hold the line in terms of what we've been able to accomplish and push and make progress where we can. Because we are making progress, right? Despite all the challenges, the loss in funding, the loss in state staff, the loss of community partners, I'm happy to report that we are making progress. This here you can see over the past 25 and so far in the 26 cycle, this is some of the accomplishments that have been made, which are really important ones. You know, we saw tobacco tax increases last year in Indiana and Maine. Earlier this year, Washington State redefined its tobacco product definition to include pouches, so now nicotine pouches are taxed in Washington. We saw program funding increases in Montana and Tennessee last year. This year, we saw West Virginia allocated some of its dual settlement money to the program. It sounds like there might be an opportunity to do that here in South Carolina. I really hope you're successful. Oklahoma, you know, they get a significant amount of funding from the settlement agreement. It's called TSET, Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust. It's a really strong, comprehensive program that's been in place for, 30 years now. Well, the legislature wanted to dismantle that program and shift the way it was funded. They stayed strong, pushed back, and TSET remains intact. The session just ended last week. We had a first smoke-free ordinance in Knoxville, Tennessee, passed its first reading. Kristen can tell you more about that if you're interested. They're moving towards their second reading next week. So that's great progress in a place, Knoxville, Tennessee. You know, we had comprehensive local flavor policies passed in communities in Minnesota and in Colorado. Tobacco retail licensing is a policy that's really gaining momentum. There's just, you know, a handful of states, I think maybe 7 states, South Carolina is one of them, who hasn't passed a tobacco retail licensing law. South Dakota passed one earlier this year. Kentucky passed last year. Virginia has a TRL law now, and local community in Colorado also passed a TRL law. This is all in 2025 and in 2026. Missouri defeated preemption for the 6th year in a row this session. Amazing work in Missouri. We also had legal victories. The industry challenged flavor policies in both Oregon and Ohio, saying that they were preempted by state law. And just in the past 2 months, we had state Supreme Courts in both of these states say, nope, those policies are good to go. The locals had the authority to do that. And then we've talked about registry or directory bills that are being pushed by the industry. Those are coming up all over the place, and we've had some good success in defeating them. So where are we going? I think that, you know, I'm not going to share any sort of new, bold new solution that we need to do. You know, there's just this great thing, there's this great idea that we have that, like, no one's doing yet, right? I'm not going to share that because we actually know a lot about what we need to do. We have decades of experience, lots of research telling us what works. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? We have this tobacco control vaccine, some people like to call it. It is, much of the progress, all of those declines in smoking rates that we've talked about, a lot of that has happened with policies that are in this tobacco control vaccine. Smoke-free policies, tobacco tax increases, comprehensive programs that include hard-hitting public education campaigns, and access to cessation resources. So these are the key strategies, lots of evidence behind. This is what really drives down tobacco use rates. These are the kinds of strategies that will also help with some of these newer products. Certainly public education campaigns, price increases, and access to cessation resources. But now, there's been a recognition that we need to kind of do more to continue to make progress in some of the places that have implemented these policies, and then in some places where it's not, the political environment isn't quite right, or for some other reason, there's other challenges, you can't get to all of these vaccine policies. There's what we call the booster. And a lot of these focus on, or all of them focus on, the point of sale. And so why the point of sale? Well, that's where you can reach all demographic groups, right? They interact with the point of sale. But it's also where the industry is. It's also where the industry is marketing its products, and where young people access products. And I had already, some of the booster strategies include impact age of sale, what can you do to impact the price? It's not just tobacco taxes, but it's coupons, right? Prohibiting coupons. Retail licensure, I'd already talked about the importance of that. It's foundational to be able to enforce other tobacco control policies, is having tobacco retail licensure. And then just, where are retailers located, right? That's another part of the vaccine booster. So, policy progress is important, right? That's population-based strategies like policies is the way to really have an impact. But that starts with building blocks, community outreach, youth voices, education at the local level. And I want to take a minute to talk about the youth because their voices are so powerful and they are key partners in our fight. Youth help raise visibility, they help educate, they help raise awareness. All of these are important building blocks. If we ever want to have policy success, you have to raise awareness, you have to have visibility for your issue. And youth are tremendous partners in helping us do that. They bring enthusiasm, they bring momentum, they bring real stories about how tobacco use impacts them, how the industry is targeting them, and they can also talk passionately about how we solve that problem. They might have innovative ideas about how to solve the problem. And your very own fire squad right here in the center is a great example of that. And we were thrilled to give them, just a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C., they came, we gave them the National Group Youth Advocate of the Year Award. It's a really great award. Very competitive, I can say, as someone who's been on the other side of seeing all of the applicants. These kids are just amazing, doing great work, and Fire Squad is no joke. They're really doing fabulous work. They're a great example of what I'm talking about in terms of bringing visibility to the issue. They educated their communities about e-cigarette use, their friends and classmates who were using e-cigarettes. They educated council members about, easy access to these products, about tobacco and vape shops that were popping up in their communities. And they brought, the passion. They brought the voices. They were right there. They could tell great stories. And that led to the city council passing an ordinance that restricted tobacco retailers where they could be in terms of they couldn't be near schools or near other youth-centered facilities. So this is the kind of thing that they're doing great work. Fire Squad is I would put up as the top example of that kind of work, and just really encourage you to keep up mentoring, supporting youth in their efforts because they really do a great job and they're critical to our down-the-line policy success. In the same vein, broader partnerships and community mobilization is key to policy success. Meeting people where they are, educating them about the issues, telling them about nicotine pouches, telling them about e-cigarettes, and just the crazy amount of nicotine that is in these products. People don't know, right? And then you get them involved, you get them interested, you can grow and diversify your coalition. That is just gonna pay dividends down the road, right? I know you did the Poetry Slam, which was a major success. These are, the No Menthol Sunday is another great example of this community mobilization and education, raising visibility work. So applaud you for that and encourage you to keep up those efforts. And then, what you can do, it's kind of, I've highlighted a bunch of this. Be a spokesperson. You're an expert on this issue, right? You have a lot to bring to the table, a lot to share with people. So I encourage you to do that. Talk to people about what you're working on, what you are concerned about in your community. Advocate with legislators. I know that a lot of people in this room can't do direct advocacy, but you can share information. You can share data. You can share information and data with policymakers, but you can also share data and information and stories with advocates, people like Beth, like Kristen, and other people in the room who can lobby and take those stories and put them to work for you. Build and strengthen partnerships. We know how important our community partnerships are. I think this last year has really shown that more than ever. We get by with a little help from our friends, right? I know I did this past year when we were in these really challenging and difficult times and facing obstacles. Brainstorming with partners, bringing new people to the table, getting that energy. That's so important and will help sustain us. Again, raising awareness. And then lastly, monitoring, exposing, and discrediting the industry. We want to be able to let people know, the tobacco industry, a lot of them are smart, right? And they're slick. And they come in, they have these front groups, they have these quote-unquote scientific experts, and we need to be there to counter them, to tell the real story, to share the facts, the truth. Highlight when the industry is up to no good, right? Because we know, like I had said earlier, they are mainly about increasing their customer base, boosting their profits. Like, that's what they want to do. So whenever you can highlight that, whenever you can show how they're marketing to young people, I think everyone agrees that we do not want young people using tobacco products. There is no reason for a young person or a person who doesn't use tobacco to start using these newer products. There just isn't, right? There's no benefit to them. And so whenever you can highlight what the industry is doing to try to target young people and increase youth, I think, you'll be better off for it. And so I'll just end with, a little pitch to say that I hope you stay in this fight. We have been on a long journey. The journey is not over because we have this industry, right, that we know is a persistent threat. They're not going away. We can't go away. We need each other, right? If we're going to be successful, we need to work together. So I hope that you'll stay on this journey. I hope you get some tools today and some energy from being in the same room with one another. Again, I just appreciate the invitation to be here, and I know that if we work together, we engage the youth, we engage new partners, we implement evidence-based programs, we will get to where we want to go on this journey, which is a tobacco-free generation for all. And then those are just my two boys there. So that's like part of the reason why I'm here. They're my why, right? So thank you so much.